What is up, and welcome to the newest edition of the Lakers Theory podcast. I'm your host, Shane Jackson. Joined with me, as always, is Austin Case, who now has a PS5. I know there's a lot of things we got to talk about. The Lakers are never going to lose again because they're undefeated after a 4-0 preseason heading into the season. Kyle Kuzma got paid because we're recording this on Sunday, December 20th, and that happened hours ago. But I thought the most important thing to discuss was you getting a PS5 because that's how we started the last podcast. Heading into preseason. So update the people how this happened, because you were in a Discord channel, you were getting Twitter updates about when a PS5 was open, and finally it happened for you. And you got it. You're playing it this
weekend. Yeah, it was brutal. It was very hard. One of the Twitter accounts I followed said that Best Buy was going to be releasing starting at like 8 o'clock in the morning Central Time. And so naturally I was up by 7 at the computer, ready to go. 8 o'clock rolls around, nothing happens. And I was like, oh, great, here we go. Like I thought I missed it. But a lot of people were saying that like nothing happened for them either. And later Best Buy kind of came out and said that their system, they had an issue with their system. So, I was constantly checking like their website. Like, I was on their website all day, and it was probably around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Mallory had come in just talking to me, and she noticed that the add to cart button was available. And so I smashed it. I got to check out. I hit the like process your order button, whatever it is, and it asked me for a verification code. And so I got the verification code, but the screen that was supposed to let me enter the code never popped up. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like flipping out. I'm getting really pissed off. And and so I don't know, I hit refresh, and like I went through this process of getting a verification code a couple times. Nothing ever happened, and I was so mad. But I kind of just kept checking, and finally it popped back up again on my phone. And so I went through that whole process again, and it finally let me check out. And so I was like, I checked my statement or my credit card account just to see if any transaction had come up, because that was kind of something that I saw a lot of people saying was, if it's not showing up on a transaction, then it's probably not happening. But it was there. And I was really nervous about it because I was just in denial that it actually happened.
Makes sense.
And then I just got to pick it up, and it was nerve-wracking just waiting, because I think it was the 15th that I bought it, and it wasn't supposed to be available until today, actually.
Yeah.
But Friday night at 9:30, I got an email saying that my order was ready for pickup. And I just jumped up, threw my shoes on, grabbed my keys and wallet, and I bolted to Best Buy. And like their curbside pickup closed at 10. And so I was like, I'm not missing this. Like, it was available, I was going to get it. And it's awesome. It's really awesome.
Well, I'm happy for you. You put in a lot of work for it. And really everything you've done in the last couple weeks is for this moment. So you deserve it. I mean, probably more than Kyle Kuzma deserves $40 million, if we're being totally honest.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll get into that. That's the first thing we wanted to tackle with this podcast. We're going to talk about the preseason in general. We are not going to go in depth by any means on the preseason, because there's only so much you can glean from these games, obviously, but the Lakers did go 4-0, and that's worth noting. And then we'll talk about any things that stood out to us while reading and watching these games. And this will serve as just kind of a little update on what we thought happened since we were last recorded the podcast, which now I don't even remember when it was. Mostly, this is the final preseason, off-season Lakers Theory podcast, because the season starts in 2 days, and that's where I want to get into is we are going to record a podcast tomorrow night, so Monday night, where we preview the upcoming season because it starts on Tuesday. That's where we're going to fire off all our predictions, the takes. I'm probably going to find all these gambling odds, and we're going to play games and pick sides, over-unders, and all that stuff. I'm really excited about that show in particular, but I thought it was important to have a separate show just kind of discussing the preseason aspect of this. And I didn't expect it to be long, and then Kyle Kuzma signed. So let's start with Kyle Kuzma signing his extension, 3-year, $40 million, just hours ago. Again, we're recording this on Sunday, December 20th. Austin, I know you are a huge Kyle Kuzma fan. I think he's one of your jerseys that's up behind you. So was this surprising? How big of a deal is this? And just your overall thoughts on Kyle Kuzma signing the extension.
I was surprised. I know an extension. They were trying to get an extension, or at least Kuz wanted an extension. But I was really unsure. I didn't know that he proved to them enough, to get one from them. But I'm very happy to see it. Yeah, Kuz was one of my guys. I was really happy when he stuck around. With the AD trade and stuff. And I was a advocate for him to not be traded. So I am excited. And I remember LeBron quote tweeted something about who's a guy that you're going to see take a big step. And his answer was Kyle Kuzma. I think the extension is a sign that, they expect big things from him, and I really hope we see that.
Yeah, the important thing is to note is it probably makes sense given the structure of this team, right? With AD and LeBron signing longer deals and being here more long term, the whole idea of adding another superstar is out the window now at this point. There's it doesn't seem like the flexibility is going to work when you start thinking in financial terms and the salary cap terms. And obviously you know better that than I do, but that's from my understanding, that's why this makes sense. And then going into this year, this was his contract year. Theoretically, he could have had a big year and gotten a much bigger deal. And the Lakers couldn't match it in the offseason, and he would have walked for nothing. And now this offers some flexibility in a sense that, if he does exceed expectations, maybe he's a more valuable trade piece. I don't like talking about that way all the time, but it makes sense when you're trying to build a team and all that. And then even if he's just Kyle Kuzma, if you look at the number, yes, $40 million sounds like a lot because I don't know how you have him ranked in the hierarchy of rankings, but maybe there's an argument he's like the 6th best player on the team. I don't know. I don't know exactly where he would rank, but it may sound like a lot for someone who could be the 6th best player on the team, but that's $13.3 million a year. That's right around the KCP value. And I don't know about you, but it seems about right to me. And so I think when you think about it and just where the Lakers were as a team after the AD and LeBron news, which we discussed on the last podcast, and just Kyle Kuzma in general, I think it did make a lot of sense. I think it might theoretically be a win for both sides. And I don't like to just assume that because we don't know how this year is going to happen, and I don't want to always look at things from an optimistic standpoint. But for me, I think this does feel like a win for both sides.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that the first time, but you kind of mentioned what if Kuz has this amazing year and he would be a restricted free agent next summer, and the Lakers just can't match it because they don't have the space. But now, he still has a big year, and there's a team out there that wants him. It's $13 million is a pretty trade friendly contract, and it's probably going to be closer to my guess would be like 11 million in the first year, and probably and build a little bit on that. But that's 40 million is a lot of money, but over 3 years, that's pretty team friendly, I think.
And I think there is an element to, he doesn't have the contract over him now. There's not going to be after, every big game that he has, he's not going to get questions about his contract now. And maybe he could have used that as motivation and had his best year yet. Or, this just relieves all that stress. I cover college sports and high school sports. There's an element to, hey, I'm committed to this program, going into my last year of high school season or whatever. There's an element to just not having that stress over you that I think makes a lot of sense from just a mental standpoint in a year that's going to be challenging for a lot of different reasons. And I know you don't think like this, but there are Lakers fans who are probably not big fans of Kyle Kuzma, probably based off how he portrays himself in social media sometimes and all these commercials and stuff like that. I think there might be some of that to it, but I think it's worth mentioning that this guy, he's had a different role basically every year, and he doesn't know what his role is going to be like this year. He said as much, a week or so ago when he talked to the reporters. He's had such a different role on this team every year, and there's been no getting in a rhythm. He had to even take a smaller role last year, and so I think there is ways that he can just reach his full potential just by finding what he's supposed to provide on this team and having that rhythm and consistency.
Yeah, and I don't think he'll have an issue figuring that out. You have LeBron and AD by your side. It's going to make things a lot easier, and just having those two guys with you in general is probably going to help your game a lot.
For sure. Any final Kuzma thoughts? This was the big news of the podcast, so I don't want to just completely go away from him. But you, as the resident Kuzma fan, is there anything last words you want to say? I know we'll talk about him plenty throughout the season.
No, I did want to add that Kuz didn't make it onto the wall of fame here, but
okay, all right.
There's room for him. He's got to earn it.
Well, Kobe has like 4 jerseys up there.
He does, yeah. He's got 5 jerseys up here.
Okay, I gotta understand the requirements to get up on the wall of fame. Beat Kobe.
It'll be very hard. I don't think you're gonna take any of the Kobe spots. AD's probably permanent up there. That the Kobe shot he had.
Yeah.
So, but I do have a spot open for him, so he can make it.
Speaking of AD, I can mention to the people here, the Lakers Theory podcast fans, I drafted him in the first round of my fantasy basketball draft last night, which is very exciting news. I had a 3rd pick in the draft, and I thought he would go in the first 2, and someone took, I think, Giannis or whatever it was before that, and I ended up with AD. So that's exciting. I am actually very excited about that. There's an element to your favorite team, watching your favorite team and having the best player on that team maybe on your fantasy team. So I'm actually very excited about it. There obviously is going to be times where I'm upset about it because they're resting AD on a back-to-back or whatever. But for now I'm very excited. Let's talk about the preseason though, because based off the preseason, I'm pretty sure the Lakers are never going to lose a basketball game for as long as we're doing this podcast. Because last time I checked, the Lakers Theory podcast is now, a month old or whatever it is, and the Lakers haven't lost since it's been created. So, therefore, we are fixing the Lakers.
That's a clear indication.
Yes. Let's recap the games real quick. I just want to run through the scores in case for some reason anybody who's listening to this podcast did not watch the games, which I doubt it. The first preseason game, December 11th, 87-81 win for the Lakers. Game 2, December 13th, 131-106 win over the Clippers. Then Suns back-to-back. December 16th was a 112-107 win, and December 18th was a 114-113 win. And I didn't watch these games too closely. I know you probably didn't either. But is there an overarching takeaway from a 4-0 preseason from you? Was there one thing that stood out from those 4 games from a team standpoint?
I really think we saw that what the bench guys are really going to be capable of this year. I know LeBron and AD didn't play at all against the Clippers. I think
they didn't play the first 2 games. Yeah,
okay,
so they played the last 2 games.
Yeah, and so it's just a preseason, so people aren't going to look too much into it. But this was a short off season. 4 games of preseason, you got to think there's some element of guys are, they're going to take that serious because, they haven't played even though it's only been a few months, but you don't have as much time to get ready until the games actually count. And so I'm very excited. Like I wasn't sure what to expect, but after the preseason, I got to say I'm very excited to see what this team does.
Yeah, what I came away from this preseason actually, and I know there's only so much you can take from games like this, but what I found interesting didn't happen until Game 3, but it was an indication that, hey, this team might be more wired differently than we expected, maybe locked in differently than we expected. There was a second quarter in that Suns game in particular where they were just absurd. Collective defensive effort was awesome. I think they at one point went on like a 45-15 run or whatever against the Suns and just completely took over that game. This was the first game with AD and LeBron in the mix. And you could see LeBron, closing out on a three-pointer. You could see AD blocking shots and readjusting or whatever. And you could just see a kind of buy-in defensively that we saw, obviously, in the playoffs as a team. And it was, the first game with AD and LeBron. And the reason why that stood out to me is because, we've even mentioned it, but I think the narrative has been, the Lakers are coming off, a championship where it's a condensed offseason, such a quick turnaround. LeBron even said on his show that, hey, I'm probably going to not go as hard. And other people have implied that maybe the Lakers are going to take it a little more easy in the regular season. And yes, it was just one game, and you can look at individual moments to say maybe I'm overreacting and all that. But I think it speaks, the 4-0 effort through the preseason, that second quarter against the Suns, I think that all speaks to maybe the Lakers, this team, is just wired differently. And there is no freeloading. There is no just taking it easy. And nobody would blame them if they did want to do that. And there's still going to be times where LeBron or AD rests on a back-to-back. There's still going to be times, obviously there's load management, all that stuff. And so I'm not saying that's not going to happen. I'm just saying that I thought, hey, a random Wednesday night against the Hornets, they might not take that as seriously, and who cares, And if what we saw in the preseason was any indication, I question how true that is. Or maybe it was just a little bit more overblown. Because it's not just you and me saying this. It's other people. It's other people who talk about the Lakers and write about the Lakers. It's the national media even. And who can blame them? There's a chance that when we get to the Western Conference playoffs, home court doesn't matter, right? If there's no fans or whatever, we don't know what the situation is going to be with COVID. But there's a chance that it's not going to matter where you're at in the seeding line or whatever. And so who cares if you're the 1 seed or the 2 seed or whatever? And so that's why you can take a night off in February or not. And they can still do that. I'm just saying, based off what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, I'm not as convinced as I was maybe a month ago that will be the case.
Yeah, I really think something that helps them is they got younger. There's more energy. Like just in a preseason game, I can see the difference in the energy just from games last year. And so they may want to take it slow at some point, but I think the team they have, they want to win. Like, that's why they're there. They want to win basketball games. And so, if it's a go easy night for LeBron or go easy night for AD, there's a handful of other guys that are going to go as hard as they can every single night. And so, I think they have the squad to do that. Like 80% LeBron and 80% AD in a game is still good enough to beat a lot of teams in the NBA.
And maybe that's the better takeaway. And you just put it better than what I could have said. It's the reason why it was overblown is because this roster is better. And so you can make up for maybe not 100% effort from your 2 stars. And so maybe I am reading too much into just everybody buying in on for a quarter or whatever against the Suns or whatever it is. But I honestly thought, though, going into the season, that it's like, there's going to be times in the regular season where we're frustrated with the team. It's just be like, you are so much better than this, and you're not showing it. And I was convinced that was going to happen. I'm less convinced of that now. That's basically what I was trying to say. But I think it probably is, to your point, is that there's just a better roster. I mean, there's just more players, more juice off the bench. I guess now is a good time as any. Get your opinion on this. We're not crazy. There's other Lakers podcasts out there. I saw that the Anthony Irwin over the Locked On Lakers podcast tweeted about this or put it on his show that this was the best roster that the Lakers have ever had in his lifetime of covering the team, which is, I think, the last 2 decades or whatever it was. And he does a great job on his show and all that and stuff. And very knowledgeable about the team and doing something way different than we are because we're just fans covering this team and we don't care. But I wanted to get your opinion on that, really. And I feel like this is the best time to talk about it because we were just talking about the roster. You have obviously been a Lakers fan for that pretty much period. I mean, this is including the three-peat. This is including the later championships as well. Do you think – I mean, there's a difference, and he says this on his show. There is a difference between best team and best roster, obviously, because this isn't the best team because they haven't won a championship yet. I mean, that's just the truth. But in terms of roster, do you think this is the best roster that we've seen on the Lakers for the last 2 decades or whatever it is?
Yeah. On paper, I think you could say that.
I did put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I never thought about that, and so I don't have a full collective answer, but I could agree with that. Like, I really feel like this is a very well put together team, and so I wouldn't have any arguments that this is the best roster that they've had. They to be the best team. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
They still have to play games that count. They still have to go win a championship together. But yeah, this is a really good roster, and you have guys, young guys that still haven't even scratched the surface of what they're capable of.
Yeah, I really wanted to get your opinion on that. I should have just messaged you because I was listening to him talk about that on one of my runs recently, but it was interesting to me. I don't know. For anybody who's first time listener to the Lakers Theory podcast, I am a new Lakers fan because I came here because of LeBron. So I don't know. I do not have an opinion on this. I don't have a take or whatever, but it makes sense from my point of view. Just if you just glance at it and say, yeah, I mean, basketball players are better. It's just they get better as the more years, generations that we get into this. They're more athletic and all that. And part of why people believe this, you and Anthony and all this, is that kind of depth that they're talking about. They're not even talking about Kobe and Shaq, which that's not even. So we're not even debating LeBron, AD versus Kobe, Shaq because we could have done that another year. They're debating the depth of that, and I think I mean, based off that premise, I think there's an argument for it for sure.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I mean, we're gonna figure out more about this team as they play, but as of right now, I would get behind that statement.
That's what makes this year very exciting. Our first year doing this podcast. I'm looking forward to seeing how good this roster, this team can be. And obviously we'll adjust our opinions on a weekly basis, I'm sure, throughout the season. But that's probably it. I mean, from going back to all the way to the beginning of this, from my team takeaway was it probably just is as simple as this roster is loaded. And that's all I saw for the preseason was, regardless of who their opponent is and if it's a TV game or not, this team has a chance to win because they are a very good basketball roster. And there's a reason why, national media and all that are going to rank them as the number 1 team going into this year. So let's talk about individual players. And I should really say player because we're only talking about one guy now at this point, which is the only guy anybody who is covering the Lakers or has watched the Lakers is talking about probably based off the preseason. And that is our main man, Talen Horton Tucker. Obviously, if you hadn't listened to the previous, 3 or 4 Lakers Theory podcasts that we've done, I think we've mentioned him on every single podcast. So this is before he ever played a second of preseason. We were very excited about him, and he was even better than we could have ever anticipated. He averaged 20.5 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2.3 steals per contest, all in 31.6 minutes per action. in a 4-game span. Obviously, preseason, disclaimer, all that crap, blah, blah, blah. But there were so many good plays on his tape in the preseason. I mean, just ripping and stealing Kawhi and going on the other end. And Kawhi asking him how old he was off the first preseason game or whatever it was. It was awesome. I've been a big fan of Talen Horton Tucker. I covered Big 12 basketball. And so he obviously was someone I was very interested in. And when the Lakers drafted him, I was very excited about him. I could never have imagined that he would be this good this early. And I don't even think it's just your typical disclaimer of preseason basketball. Like, they are very excited about him. Frank Vogel says he's harder on him. You know, when he's talking to local reporters, he says he's harder on him than any other player. I mean, they expect big things from him. I don't know if that all translates into this year or not. We'll discuss that in a little bit. But, Austin, what are your takeaways from Talen Horton Tucker's play on the preseason?
I was surprised. As we said, like, we heard rumbles that, look out for him. He's going to be some guy that, to keep an eye on. And we got a little glimpse of him in the playoffs last year that, 1 or 2 game span that he got some minutes. But I'm very excited to see what he can do. I highly doubt he's getting 30 plus minutes in the regular season. But why can't he get 15 to 20? That
might be ambitious too.
I mean, that could be a stretch. He's got 4 games of he balled for 4 games. So, but we kind of mentioned that he don't be surprised if he's in the rotation during the season. Yeah. And so, he's clearly earned that. But yeah, this is awesome. Like, I'm very excited to kind of see where this goes with him. One play I remember, like, that really stood out to me was just a layup, but he took some contact and he spun around and was pretty much, his back was to the basket, but he it went in, and I was just like, that's amazing. Like, it's just crazy. And I think we're going to be pretty surprised by him this year. Yeah. And that I'm hopeful that this happens.
Yeah, I watch as many of these player and coaches interviews as possible, because I think that is probably more informative than any preseason games or whatever. But it stood out to me that, Marc Gasol and Frank Vogel went out of their way to kind of talk about his defense, and that what he can provide on that end of the floor. Because to me, that speaks to maybe there's a chance that there is an actual role for him on this team. It's easy to be the 19, 20-year-old kid or whatever and be focused on the offensive end of the floor and say, hey, I can go score. And yeah, you can score in the preseason, but you're not going to do that in the regular season, no matter who you're playing against. And so for me, when they said, hey, no, watch out for the way he plays defensively, and they talked about his effort on that end of the floor, I think that more than anything suggests that, hey, there is a chance that he's going to get some real minutes. I would guess, if we're going minutes guess, because you threw out 15, 20, I think that's optimistic. But this is a little teaser into what Monday's show will be about, which will be out on Tuesday, where we preview the season and basically offer up our predictions. I would predict around 10 minutes per game. Does that seem feasible to you? I think.
Yeah, I think 15 to 20. Yeah, it is a stretch, but he could probably earn his way to that. But yeah, probably 10 to 12 is probably a more realistic view of his starting minutes.
I mean, again, going back to our discussion about the roster is too good to give Horton Tucker 20 minutes per game. So, I mean, there's going to be nights when obviously he has a bigger role, I think, and maybe gets into resting and stuff like that when you're talking about the better players, and maybe he plays more minutes. But in general, I would maybe I'm a coward and I'm playing it safe here, but I think 10 minutes per game is a reasonable expectation for THT. Because I got news flash for you, the 31 minutes per outing, I think there are 2, maybe 3 guys on the team that are going to get 30-plus minutes per game. I mean, this is a deep team. And if anybody other than AD, LeBron, and I think Dennis Schroeder got more than 30 minutes per game, I'd be very surprised. That would be my guess. Any final thoughts on THT? That's honestly, I think I'm going to get a THT jersey at this point. I'm pretty convinced. I think that's going to be my wall of fame. It's just going to be THT jersey with a poster of him. Make sure I get the Iowa State jersey as well.
Yeah, there you go.
Any final thoughts on our guy before we get in wrap this thing up?
I don't have any. Yeah, I look forward to watching him this season. I hope he can slowly get a bigger role on the team.
Yeah, here's the thing. It's been a long time since I hosted a podcast. I'm doing such a terrible job as being a host, but I just realized that sometimes I ramble and I'm like, I don't know if I've let Austin talk in a while. And so when I ask you final thoughts, I don't expect you to have final thoughts. I'm just saying if I rambled on too much and you didn't get to say anything, I would feel bad. So if you just say, hey, yeah, THC's a baller, I don't have anything to say, that's fine with me. I'm only saying because I'm like, I don't know the last time I asked Austin anything. And again, that goes to this podcast will get better. We'll get better as we get more reps with this. Make sure you're following us on social media, by the way. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all at Lakers Theory. Just Lakers Theory, obviously easy to spell. And we're going to keep doing these podcasts on a more regular basis now that the regular season is approaching. Like I said, we're doing a season preview podcast Monday night for Tuesday. Then the Lakers play that first game on Tuesday. And we'll probably recap that game sometime after, either Tuesday or Wednesday night. And then we'll probably have another one in the weekend after Christmas. By the way, happy holidays in advance to everybody that's listening to this podcast. But let's wrap this thing up with another final thoughts question from me. I do actually have things I want to talk about here, but I do want to ask, is there anything that's on your brain before, as we head into the regular season, before we get into all our predictions in the next podcast? Is there anything you're curious about with this team heading into the season?
No, not really. I honestly feel like I've been so disconnected from the real world and basketball and everything else, just because I've been putting so much energy into the PS5 search. So I have to reconnect myself with, all the Lakers information and stuff. But, really, I'm excited that the season starts in a couple days. It was a short off season, but I found myself realizing that I really love basketball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to mention this all the time on this podcast because I think it's important that the people who are listening to the show, watching the show, however, get to know us. And I know you mentioned your wife earlier. You didn't ever say her. I'm going to repeat myself from time to time on these podcasts. But I cover college basketball. I cover KU basketball. And I even this recently as this last Big 12 game, KU played Texas Tech in the Big 12 opener. I forgot just how miserable college basketball is. It is the worst. And I actually do have Lakers thoughts, so I'll get into it in a little bit. But comparing it to professional basketball, it is night and day. There were so many charged, non-charged calls in that Texas Tech KU game. I wanted to blow my brains out. It was just so terrible. And it's going to be a welcome surprise or all that when the Lakers return to actually playing real basketball. And being a fan, just watching it from a fan perspective and, having beer and getting emotional after a win or a loss, I'm going to very much enjoy that come Tuesday and Friday on Christmas. I'm very much looking forward to this week and getting into all of that. Before the season starts, though, there are things I'm actually curious about this team, and I just want to get your thoughts because, this podcast I said was going to be short, but it's apparently not going to be short. Dennis Schroeder is implying that he's going to start at point guard, right? Or that he wants to start at point guard. Frank Vogel, I think, said as much that it's probably going to happen. I think, is that what you expect at this point? And how do you think that's the right move for the Lakers? I'm just curious what you think. I think we when he came to the Lakers, we said he was going to start. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's what I think to either of us. Do you expect him to start? Do you think it's the right move?
So when he signed, I think I mentioned that I envisioned him like he would be a starter, and there's no issue with him coming out and saying, "Hey, I want to start." He thinks he's going to be the starter. That's a great attitude to have. I think he does. Like he's an extra ball distributor. Maybe he's not out there with that starting, with LeBron and AD as much, maybe.
Yeah.
Just because LeBron's going to demand the ball a lot, and so he might not be needed out there as a distributor and as often. So, but yeah, he probably does start, and that's perfectly okay. It probably relieves LeBron a little bit to start the game. He doesn't have to come out and demand the ball first thing. He can get into the game a little bit without having to worry about that aspect.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm not surprised if he ends up being the starter in a season opener. I think it's probably the right move. And again, I think he's probably going to be like third in the team in minutes. I mean, I think he's going to be a very important person to this team. It will be interesting because I feel like LeBron almost embraced that point guard role. In some way, he's been a point guard all his career. Everybody knows that. He always brings the ball forward, but he led the league in assists last year. He really embraced being the point guard last year. And so I will be curious to see how that impacts him moving forward. One more thought about this team, and nothing that based off the preseason has really brought this thought in my head. These are just things I wanted to get off on my chest and talk about with you before the season starts. And I don't think we'll have that opportunity on the next show. But Anthony Davis's minutes at center, obviously they lost two big centers that I think made it easier for him to play more of the power forward, which is what he prefers. But do you expect him to play more at the 5 than he did last year? And I know he did in the postseason, especially, at times splitting with Markieff Morris in the kind of a smaller lineup. Do you expect him to play more at the 5? Obviously, he doesn't want to as much. But now he doesn't have anything hanging over the Lakers. I mean, he's here for the long run. They may just say, hey, you're better at this position. We're going to play you more at it because we don't have any other options. Do you expect that?
So I was kind of thinking about that. They have him for 5 years. So maybe they just say, hey, AD, you're going to play the 5, a handful of minutes every night. Like, it's just going to happen. But I don't know. Like, Marc Gasol's going to be the 5 a lot. I don't know if he's going to start. I assume he does. But Harold at Montrezl, I think he comes in and plays a 5 a lot.
Yeah.
He's small. He's smaller than AD, so it would make sense to move AD to the 5. But he's big and strong, physical guy. So why can't he play the 5? It might just come down to AD's preference.
Yeah.
Maybe he's more willing to play the 5 this year than he was. We obviously see how good they are when he does play the 5. So, maybe that's something he takes into account. But it probably doesn't matter during the regular season. Maybe he doesn't take a single minute at the 5 during the regular season, and then once we get into the playoffs, maybe that changes. But it probably just comes down to his preference and what he's comfortable with doing.
This is all a ploy just for you to talk about my fantasy team, and I just wanted to know from my fantasy team perspective how I should view this. Is he a center on my team? No, those are just probably two of the more pressing questions I think entering the year on this team, which probably speaks to how good this team is because those aren't really alarming questions. But those are just things I'm curious about before Tuesday gets here. But we are going to preview the season. We're going to fire off predictions. Again, I'm going to find as many gambling odds as I can. We are going to battle it out with our picks and see who – we'll try to keep track of them and see who's right at the end of the year. I'm actually looking forward to Monday's show. It will be out on Tuesday. I doubt we record it live on Monday night, but we will record shows live at some point in the year when we get more of a following and people actually care enough to tune in live and provide comments. But no, this was a good preseason recap. I think we didn't talk too much about it. We didn't say they're the greatest team ever because they went 4-0. Although I think there's an argument probably for it. But I think we recapped preseason well enough, and that will do it for now. I'm not even going to ask you final thoughts. I'm assuming you're good and you want to play your PS5. So that's going to do it for the show. Again, we will record another one Monday night for Tuesday. But for now, thank you for listening. He's Austin Case. I'm Shane Jackson. This has been the Lakers Theory Podcast. See you next time.